Hi, welcome back to Everyday Behavior. My name is Mary Ann Shepard, and today we're talking about essentials in data collection with discrete trial training. So we have talked throughout all of the materials in our series and throughout the lifetime of our channel and all of our training materials about how important data collection is. But when we're looking at discrete trial training, there are a couple of things that we especially want to make sure that we include on those data sheets. So the first thing you want to do is make sure you include any general identifying information. So the student's name, the date, who the therapist was, or the teacher that was working with the student, who was delivering it, or was it the parent? So you want to make sure that you're collecting data so that you can measure your outcomes and monitor the student's progress. Also, you want to make sure that you can identify, and the reason that this identifying information is so important is if the student's having difficulty generalizing this skill from one person to another or one setting to another. So when you're recording this general identifying information like your setting and the student name and the date and who the individual delivering the antecedents or the instruction was, then you may be able to go back and look for patterns in behavior. But the most important thing that we all want to be able to demonstrate is that the student is making progress. And it's just like taking your daily weight. If you're working on losing weight, it's important to know where you start and where you're at and the progress in between. And so often you take or measure your weight at various intervals. And so it's important to do this. Sometimes it's things like weight gain or hair growth that the change happens so slowly that you don't notice it unless you're measuring it. And so that's why it's important to make sure that you're measuring the student's behavior. So include that date, time, all of those important things. Then you want to record the goal information. So you want to make sure that you record what goal you're working on, what your objective is, or which area in the goal that you're at. So what objective are you at? Make sure you include, is this a skill that you're baselining? So we're not necessarily teaching the skill, we're just seeing what they can do without prompting, without reinforcement or a consequence. Are you in the teaching stage where you're prompting, you're using errorless learning, or maybe you are still doing that consequence? Or are you in that maintenance phase where you're not necessarily, the student should have mastered this and it's been a while since you've taught this skill or focused on this skill? You want to make sure that you include your prompting level. You want to make sure that you also include what environment you're in. So are you in the classroom? Are you at the tabletop? Are you in a naturalistic setting? Are you working in the community or in the home? So make sure that you include your setting information. The reason this is important is because if you're out or if another therapist is also working with this particular child, you want to make sure that you're communicating from session to session how you're doing things and also communicating back to other professionals who are working with the child. Because one of the things that you may find is that the parent may say, they're not doing this skill at home, or another therapist may say, they're not doing that skill with me. And so you want to make sure that you can identify, are there any problems in generalization or maintenance of this skill? As you're going along, you want to make sure that you're including the individual student responses. So for each and every trial within discrete trial training, you want to make sure that you record if the student was correct or incorrect, or if there was no response. Make sure again that you're recording if the correct or incorrect response was prompted, if you did any error correction procedures. So just make sure that you're recording what the behavior was. And then you also want to summarize and graph that data. So make sure that after you're done, at the end of the session, you calculate what percent were they correct, what duration did they engage in the skill, whatever it is that you're graphing. Because if you're looking from day to day, it may look like you're not making progress, or you may notice individual variables, or like, a day that was really bad, you may be more likely to focus on isolated data points, such as a good data point or a bad data point, rather than focusing on the progress over time. So just like your weight, you may get on the scale one day and it may be really high or it may be really low. And if it's really low, you may say, I can splurge today. If it's really high, you may be threatened to give up. And so you may overestimate or underestimate the student's progress, but when you graph that data, you can really see over time the trend in the data. So it's important to graph your data when you're working on any kind of discrete skill. And then you want to evaluate the student's progress. So you visually analyze that graph to evaluate, is the student progressing in this skill? Are there any specific changes that we need to make? Have they mastered the skill? Typically, the industry standard is that 80% accurate across 3 consecutive days is considered mastery. And so if they mastered it, do we want to move on to the next objective? So you don't want to get stuck at any one objective. You want to keep progressing the students' learning in a quick and efficient way. When you change, you typically draw lines in the graph to indicate there was a change from one data point to the other. So you're still working on a single goal, but maybe you changed, which could indicate or communicate any changes in the data as you go along. And then you often want to, once you stop teaching a skill, you don't want to just say, okay, we're done with that skill, we're not coming back to it. You want to make sure that when you're done teaching a skill and they've reached that 80% mastery for 3 consecutive days, that you don't just get rid of it, but you write down that, hey, we're going to probe this at 2, 4, and 6 weeks post teaching phase to make sure that they've maintained this skill outside of teaching. So those are important things that you want to consider with discrete trial training and with your essentials in data collection. I hope that this information has been helpful and has expanded your knowledge and your ability to carry out some DTT procedures. I want to thank the Oklahoma State Department of Education who helps fund these videos and make these videos possible. I also want to thank everyone who continues to contribute to these videos. I want to encourage you to follow us on Facebook by liking or following us. I also want to encourage you to hit the red subscribe button down below on the YouTube channel, or to be watching for our upcoming podcast videos. And if you are listening to this on podcast, I want to encourage you to continue to like or follow us on whatever your podcast browser is and give us some feedback. But you can find all of our materials on our website at www.everydaybehaviors.com. Thank you and have a wonderful day.